your life is on the line and you know that you're on an oxygen tank and they're going to put you in your head, see what you do. Because the bottom line is that me, I'm one person. I can never miss.
Guy's not being loyal to you. How could you be loyal to him?
Yeah.
And whether you're your father or not. So, but it's always been hard because it was my father.
The word came down, this guy had to go. We didn't know nothing about it until the last minute. And I liked him. I liked Billy. He was a nice guy, but...
Welcome to the show. Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Vic Ferrari, right?
Hey, Bill, how you doing?
What's going on, man? How have you been?
I'm doing great. Yourself?
I'm doing really good, man. Moving along. Things are really looking positive for me in the future. I'm really working at trying to establish myself, and it's starting to work, man. I think so.
I'm glad to hear that. Your podcast looks like it's taking off.
I'm trying every day. I try to be consistent, and step up my game. So today we're going to talk about 9/11 because today is 22 years? 22, right?
Yeah.
So I want to talk about where you were that day. When did you first hear about what happened on 9/11? If people don't know, this is Vic. He was a NYPD detective, and you were with organized crime task force, right? We'll get into that another time, but for now, we're going to talk about 9/11 and the craziness that New York was dealing with that day.
The wild thing is the day before. So 9/11 happened on a Tuesday, and the day before I was in Philly, and I took an Amtrak back to New York City. And I remember Amtrak, just before you go into the tunnel to go under the Hudson River, you're kind of parallel in the New York City skyline. And I remember seeing the Twin Towers the day before and just, looking how beautiful it was. The following day, my office was in the Bronx, and I started my shift at 7 a.m. because I had court literally down the block from the World Trade Center in Manhattan at 9. So what was supposed to happen that day was I was going to come in at 7, and I was supposed to leave my office no later than 8 to get down, fight traffic, find a parking spot. And my sergeant and I we had locked this guy up for a couple of stolen vehicles, and he was going to give us a guy that was working in Department of Motor Vehicles up in Harlem that was pumping out driver's licenses. So we were supposed to leave the office no later than 8, and my sergeant's nowhere to be found. So finally he shows up, and I'm like, come on, we got to go. He goes, all right. And he's getting his stuff. And our office was on the second floor of a housing police building. And one of the housing cops ran upstairs and said, you got to put the TV on. A plane hit the World Trade Center. So we're watching it on TV. And, you got to remember, New York City, you have 3 major airports, right? Kennedy, LaGuardia, Newark. Then you have Teterboro. There's a couple of smaller airstrips or airports. So we were under the impression that, some old guy flying a Cessna lost control of his plane, had a heart attack, and hit the World Trade Center. And as we're watching it, here comes the second plane. So like, oh shit, this is definitely terrorism. And I had worked in 93 when you had the truck bombing in the basement of the World Trade Center. People forget about that. Same people, but 8 years earlier. And, we knew immediately, get into uniform and stand by. So in my office in the Bronx, there was like 20 detectives. So we put on our uniforms and by about 1:30, we were down there. We just, probably by about noon, they said, all right, jump into cars. We're going to take the West Side Highway down. We're going to park in Lower Manhattan. We met up, and it was just chaos just on the West Side Highway. There was just trucks and vehicles, EMS, fire trucks, just people
this time
running around.
The buildings didn't collapse yet, right?
They had come down already.
They were already down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they came down like 10 o'clock in the morning or something like that.
I
watched it on television.
Yeah. Around 9:45, I think. Around 9:50 they fell, right?
Yeah, it was around 10 a.m. And I remember, like I'm saying to myself, by this point in my career, I had like 14 or 15 years in. I had seen a lot. I had walked into homicides and stuff and seen a lot of gory shit. But I remember saying to myself, wow, like I didn't know what to expect going down there. Like, wasn't trained for that. Or you can't train for that. It's just one of those disasters that there's nothing you could really prepare for. And I just remember like, well, today might be the day. I mean, I knew there was always that chance that I might lose my life before I retired. And I'm saying to myself, well, today might be the day. And like I said, we jumped into cars. We drove down the West Side Highway. We parked, and it was chaos. They didn't really know what to do with us. Some of the radio, you got to remember, a lot of the radios weren't working because the repeaters were on top of the towers. So cell phone service in that area was virtually non-existent. The radios were working, but not. I don't think that they were working 100% if memory serves me correctly. And I remember they first they put us on a bus. Somebody had commandeered like a tour bus, and they packed a bunch of us on this tour bus, and we started like slowly making our way in closer off the West Side Highway. And it was like something out of a science fiction movie. Like everything is covered in that volcanic like ash, right? Everything is just, covered in that stuff. And I remember
Yeah.
they were handing out these little paper masks that you would get at Home Depot if you're going to like demo your bathroom one weekend. It wasn't like, a good mask. It was just like this paper thing. And I remember at one point we're in this bus and we pull up and we see, I think it's 7 World Trade. One of the buildings that came down later was on fire, and it looked like something out of Universal Studios when you're like in the tour bus and there's flames coming out of the building. Like, holy shit. So we parked around the block and they were trying to figure out what to do with us. And we heard that building come down a couple of blocks away, and the sound, it just,
It's like rumbling, right?
yeah, it just, we didn't know if it was going to come over the other buildings and get us. Like it just, I had never heard something like that. It was kind of like a sonic boom. Yeah. Like a rumbling, just I can't explain it. It was just the loudest thing I had ever heard, and then that produced more dust. So I think we walked in on Broadway. So there was a bunch of us, and we're just, the closer you got to ground zero, the darker it got. It was a beautiful day. It was a nice sunny day.
Yeah.
But with all that stuff in the air, like all that dust and crap and asbestos, and the closer you got, it got darker because the sunlight was having difficulty getting through the particles of the debris. And it was just like random shit was just raining. And this is hours later, right? But I mean, it was just paper and papers flying. It was like a ticker tape parade of like this toxic dust. And I remember we're walking down, I think it was Broadway, and everything's covered in that dust. The food trucks are covered in that dust, the cabs that were left behind. I mean, it was like something out of a movie. Like whatever anybody was doing, they just kind of stopped, you know what I mean? And took off. And I remember seeing hundreds, if not thousands, of pairs of women's shoes, like women that worked in the financial district where they were fleeing, like Wall Street or even in the World Trade Center. They can't run in heels, so they took their heels off, just tossed them in the sidewalk and took off running. Like I just remember that, like just seeing hundreds of pairs of high heel shoes everywhere. And at some point there was a building, like an office building. And we look, and they had glass doors, and there was a couple of maintenance workers. So they let us in, and they got us some water and stuff, and just to use the bathroom, and they were really nice to us. They had stayed behind. Everybody was out of the building, but the maintenance workers stayed behind, I guess, to safeguard the building. Dedicated, I guess. And I'll never forget, like, we were talking about like who could be responsible for this. And I'll never forget this. There was a guy there from Afghanistan. I mean, what are the odds, right? And he explained to us about the Taliban and Osama bin Laden, and how the Americans financed these outsiders to fight against the Soviet Union when they came into Afghanistan. And then they kind of, between our money and these jihadists, pushed back the Russians. And then that created the Taliban, because you had all these warriors with like nothing to do. And he said, they're responsible for this. They basically seized my country. And like, all right, that was interesting enough. You know, we kind of got something firsthand before we ever heard anything on the news.
Yeah.
So then we left. We left the building after taking a break. And, you know, when we got up to ground zero, it was like, I can't explain it. It's, you know, when you're a child and you see something that's just outrageous and you can't even just figure out how it works or how it got there. I felt like a child because it was just overwhelming. And it was like that last scene of Planet of the Apes when Charlton Heston and the girl, they're at the beach and they see the Statue of Liberty head. And he's like, oh, shit, now I understand. Like, I'm standing in front of ground zero and I see this tremendous piece of the facade, that metal, you know, the decorative outside of the trade center. A tremendous piece had come down and embedded itself into the ground. And like, I just couldn't believe what I was looking at. And, you know, the closer you got to the pile, the more cloudy it was. And here's another thing that I'll never forget. A guy walked past us in like a spacesuit, like a Tyvek suit, like one of those so you don't get sick or get anything on you.
Yeah.
And he's carrying what looked like a Geiger counter. And I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, is this guy from the government? Does he work for the EPA? Is it some guy from New Jersey who had a Geiger counter and today's the day he wants to go out and test it? Never figured out who that guy was. He just kind of walked by us with this.
Yeah. How was he ready with all that equipment and everything? You know
I have no idea, but there was a guy down there with a Geiger counter. And, you know, we took periodic breaks, but they really didn't know what to do with us. We were just kind of wandering down there. And people got hurt. I mean, on the first day, there was a guy that worked in our unit. He was standing on a piece of wood, and a truck went over the board that he was standing on, and it launched him. He shot up in the air like 20 feet and landed on his head. He wound up really like screwing up his back.
A lot of people are getting hurt as this is going on because there's a lot of glass and metal everywhere, twisted metal, right?
Stepping on shit, right? Because you're in, you know, I mean, detectives. I was wearing like a pair of black. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to wear patent leather shoes. I never did. I was wearing like a pair of black Reeboks, but yeah, you could step or something could go right through your foot. Like I said, the guy that worked with us got thrown on his head. So we were down there until about 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. And then they brought us to the east side. I remember. I don't know how our vehicles got there, but I remember, or maybe we drove over to the east side. I don't remember. I mean, it's 20 something years ago. I remember they said, all right, we're going to decontaminate you. So we're like, oh, great. We figured maybe they've got some, I don't know, some kind of technology. No, basically what we did was he stepped in these little tubs about this deep. And there was a guy there with like a spray bottle of water, just like spraying the crap off. And the guy goes, yeah, when you go home tonight, run your clothes through a washing machine. I'm like, thanks. Appreciate it. And they told us, come back tomorrow, come back to the office at 5 o'clock. We're going to do this all over again. We're like, all right. So we went home. I threw my uniform in the washing machine. I washed off my sneakers the best I could. Got a couple hours sleep. And of course, my parents were at my door a couple hours later, like, because you couldn't call anybody because the phones were down. So they were happy I was alive and well. And it's funny, like by the second day going down there, second or third day, like they started getting in help, like people, specialized units from all over the country were flying in. I remember there was a woman there with a cadaver dog from Missouri. Couple of blocks, so this is wild. A couple of blocks away from ground zero, there's like a little Winnebago, like a camper. Mm-hmm. And it was like these cops from Chicago. And they just jumped into a camper and fucking drove halfway across the country. And they were like in New York. It was the second day or the third day. I'm like, these guys must have like blown through every light from here to Chicago. Like we couldn't believe how fast these guys drove down here. And they were camping out literally a couple of blocks from the World Trade Center. And, you know, as things started, the dust started clearing a little bit, like the days after. I remember, you know, there was so many vehicles down there. There was just so many vehicles just covered in crap. And people wrote like with their finger, like, you know, when you write in the snow, like, fuck you, Bin Laden. I remember seeing that, like, yeah, that made me laugh. But they really, again, they didn't really know what to do with us. And then what they started doing was we called it the Bucket Brigade. So you would get a line of cops and firemen and construction workers, and you'd form a line. We were like ants on a pile of sugar. And somebody would grab a joint compound bucket, like a 5-gallon you get at Home Depot.
Yeah.
Grab a bunch of debris, and it would get passed down the line and then sorted out somewhere. And then, I mean, after weeks of this, they knew. I mean, they knew no one was going to be recovered alive.
People out alive at first when you guys were first? Did you guys pull people out alive? No, because I've heard stories of people that were in there that got taken out alive.
There's that famous story about, I think it was 2 people were in an elevator that somehow survived, that the elevator basically acted as a void. But I'm sure there was maybe a handful of people that survived that day. But I mean,
like when you're walking up, is there like people laying on the ground like, oh, help me? Is it like that?
No.
Like people everywhere, like hurt? No.
Whoever was around that building when it came down was just crushed. Just obliterated. No. It wasn't like, I know what you're saying. Like as you're getting up, like a bad accident and his body's all over the place. No, or a mass shooting. No. It was more, it was like a building collapse. Well, I mean, it was, but I mean,
rubble everywhere.
Yeah.
Just chaos.
Yeah, there was just rubble everywhere, but no survivors. I didn't see any.
But did you see people walking around bloody and things?
Not by the time I got down there. No, I mean, whoever, you got to remember, if you ever watch the videotapes of that, you know, when you see people are fleeing when the buildings come down, I mean, most of them didn't go back. You know what I mean? They were running uptown or across one of the bridges into Queens or Brooklyn.
But all the cops in the fire department, they're running towards the building and everyone else is running away. And they're running in to try to save people. They don't know that the building's going to come down. Because is it correct that in New York, they tell you to go to the top of the building if something's happening? Or is that wrong?
That's a question you have to ask somebody in the fire department. I honestly don't know how that works.
And like, I wonder if because I didn't see any helicopters trying to land on the roof and rescue people. People were jumping out of the building and things. It was craziness.
I worked with a guy who actually went down to court that day. I didn't make it down there, like I said, because we were running late. But a guy I worked with sat next to me. He ran to the building, and he saw people jumping out the window, and he said the sound of the bodies hitting things, he said, is just something he'll never forget. Like he brought it up once, and then I never asked him about it again, but then somebody in the office brought it up and he didn't want to talk about it. But I remember him just kind of one day, just as a matter of fact, was saying, yeah, it was terrible. I was just watching them. He goes, they look like they were flying.
It's really sad, man. A lot of people lost their life that day, but there was a lot of, it brought a lot of people together too. Our country, it unified a lot of people. I feel like our country is really in a divide right now. And
it did. You're 100% right. Like I remember the first 2 weeks, New York was a different place. It just was. Like, you know, in New York, it's very cutthroat driving. You know, if you're at a light and that light turns green, if you don't have your foot on the gas, within seconds someone's leaning on the horn. No one gives you the right of way in New York City. I mean, New York City is driving is a contact sport. It's aggressive drivers. Everybody was like, no, go ahead. Everybody was on their best behavior for the first couple of weeks. And what was odd is, like, living in New York City, you got to remember the planes were grounded for about a week.
Yeah.
You didn't see airplanes for a week, which was odd. And then I remember seeing airplanes again, you know, when they lifted the ban and the airports got up and running. And then, you know, like the first couple of weeks you see airplanes and you start getting a little nervous because you're like, oh shit, is that another thing coming our way? So
and the tickets for flights were like $60. I took a flight from New York to LA in October of 2001. And it cost me $60 round trip.
Yeah, that's never going to happen again.
No.
What they did with us is they would have us down there for a couple of days, and then they would pull us out, and we'd go back to working on cases and stuff. But I worked in the auto crime division, and myself and the people I work with are experts in motor vehicles. So when they started bringing in the heavy equipment and taking the debris out in bulk, loading it into trucks, there's a landfill out in Queens, Staten Island, called Fresh Kills, and it was closed for many, many years, and they had to reopen it. That was a wild place to go to. That, so they were sending my unit out there because when they started pulling out debris, with heavy equipment, there was tons of vehicles, private vehicles, fire trucks, police vehicles, and lots of city vehicles. So they were getting brought out to the dump, and they had us cutting them open to make sure no one was trapped in there. They wanted to make sure people weren't making fraudulent insurance claims like, yeah, I parked my car in the World Trade Center and it's gone. So they had to account for these vehicles. And that dump was wild because it was like being on the surface of the moon, because it's a landfill and they dump garbage there for decades. So it's high. You're high up, and it's like really windy. And it was just wild. They had debris on conveyor belts, and people were dressed up in these space suits. We wore them too, but we were doing more stuff with the vehicles. And just, like picking through stuff on a conveyor belt as it came through to see if, wallets and stuff, to see if they could identify people. But that dump was a wild place. It just was nasty. And they had those big dump trucks that are like earth movers. I mean, you need like a ladder to climb into this thing. It's not just, like a Ford F-150 where you step up on a ramp. You got to climb a goddamn ladder to get up into this.
I remember they had those really big earth movers and shit like that down there. It wasn't like they weren't like having little bobcats and shit. No. They had the serious equipment down there. Did you guys find bodies in cars and things?
No, I didn't, and I didn't hear of anybody. But I remember like going out there and just seeing rows and rows and rows of fire trucks. I just at like maybe 100, it was just the amount of vehicles, because you got to remember, underneath the World Trade Center, you had a parking lot, a tremendous parking lot underground for people. And then you had all those emergency. I mean, it was all hands on deck. Fire trucks from all over the city were going down there, and police vehicles were going down there. So, when that thing imploded, it took everything in with it.
So all them cars that were around the building are just covered in debris. Yeah. And then they're shoveling them onto these trucks, bringing them to the dump where you are, right? Yeah. Just dumping them there, and you guys are sifting through things.
Pretty much. And here's something that no one talks about. Everybody gives the cops and the firemen the credit, but you know what? It was those construction workers, the iron workers. There was a ton of people in the construction trades. You drove heavy equipment, crane operators. They don't get their due for being down there, because without them, it would still be a mess down there. Those guys were exposed to shit just like we were. And I don't know if they were getting paid, probably not the first couple of days, but a lot of those construction workers, iron workers, my hat's off to them, because they really were essential in getting that stuff out there and enabling, us to do our jobs.
Yeah, there was a lot of people that went down there and volunteered their time. They didn't get paid. Maybe they got sick afterwards. How many people do you know that got sick after doing this type of stuff?
A lot. It's funny you should say that. I go for cancer screening every year. They have this thing with the World Trade Center that every year you go for a full physical. It's blood, urine, chest X-ray, ask you a ton of questions. They're gathering information, and then they're checking to see if you're all right. I know a lot of people that died of cancer, weird cancers, people that never smoked dying of lung cancer, brain cancer, just, and highly aggressive. It's like they find out they get it and, within a couple of months or a year. So yeah, there are a lot of people that I know who have passed as a result of that.
Yeah. So is there a lot of memorials and things like that in the city right now going on?
I'm not in New York, but yeah, I mean, every year they have a ceremony down there, and then they have the memorial. I've never been, but they said it's beautiful, the 9/11 memorial down there. And
Yeah,
next time I
Chad
go up to New York,
Marks, my
oh,
friend Chad
have you been?
Marks. No, my friend Chad Marks was down there. He was down there today, today and yesterday, and he put up a couple shots and videos of it. Shout out to Chad Marks, Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Um, it's pretty wild, man. They went to there's a museum, right?
Yeah, at the 9/11 memorial, they have a museum with photographs and I guess things that they were able to salvage, and it's yeah, I couldn't believe the amount of iron. I just remember just seeing like twisted iron beams like everywhere. They were sorting that out at the dump actually, and I don't know what they were going to do with it. Were they going to sell it or evidence? Or here's another thing I just remembered. So a couple of days after, maybe a week after, what they had us doing was, because that whole area, no one was living down there or really going to work because it was like a frozen zone.
Yeah.
And they had us going on rooftops to see if we could find stuff, you know. And it's funny. I don't know the building number, but it's on Murray Street, which was a couple of blocks from the World Trade Center. And we found a piece of the landing gear from one of the planes. We're going up on a roof, and there was like a piece of the landing gear on a roof. So it must have, when the plane exploded, bounced off. Yeah, and landed on the roof of this building.
I have a video of the 9/11 memorial. We can take a look at this real quick.
Hello and welcome to Adventure Sean, and what is going to be the hardest video I've ever filmed across both of my YouTube channels, because today I'm here in New York City at Ground Zero and the memorial and museum for 9/11, the terrible attacks that happened on September the 11th, 2001, and that nearly killed 3,000 people. I'm going to be starting off by having a walk around the memorial just here that was completed in 2011, and then I'll make my way into the museum, which is in the building just over at the back there, that later opened in 2014. I'm not going to be doing much talking throughout this video. It's
let me
into what I
turn it
normally
down a
do,
little bit.
because unless you've been here, and I'm sure there's...
So that's the imprint of the building, right? That's where the building used to be.
I believe so. I guess that's why they have it cut out like that. Wow, it's the first time I'm seeing this.
It's pretty wild, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the memorial.
Excuse me on the fact there's not going to be much talking. I'll show you the things what I am allowed to film inside the museum. I know there's quite a lot of it what can't be filmed, which is completely understandable. And yes, let's walk around the memorial, and as we can see here, these waterfalls that represent the two towers. There's one just here and another one behind the trees just over there.
So it's an imprint of the buildings, where the buildings were, is these two waterfalls that go into the, and then there's names all around the buildings. There's two of these.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this is the imprint of the building, and they're like waterfalls. Yeah, there's two of them right where the buildings used to be.
Unbelievable.
Oh, so okay. There might be a view over the top. I don't know if the guy has a drone, but
the names of all the people that lost their lives in 9/11.
It's funny, growing up in New York, I was there twice. Once with a school trip, and then I think even before that, when I was little, my uncle took my brother and I there on a Sunday morning in the winter. And you know, I was a little boy. You know, you went up to the top and those rumbling elevators, and your ears pop, and you get up to the top and you're looking down, and everybody looks like ants. But I guess I should have taken advantage of it when it was there. I just, it's one of those things. You live in New York and you just kind of don't do the tourist thing because you live there,
And then they have, there's always that saying that if you throw a penny off the World Trade Center, it'll go right through somebody's body, right?
I've heard that. I don't know that to be true. Right. If you throw a penny off, you could kill somebody. I don't know that to be true.
Or a quarter or whatever. I don't think that's true. Probably hurt somebody pretty bad.
Give you a hell of a headache.
Hell yeah. Let's skip through this a little bit.
Yeah, that's a
go to
page.
the museum. So there's the other part of it. See, there's 2 waterfalls.
And it's just how viewer discretion is advised from this point on. It's very small.
Now this is the inside of the memorial. It's crazy. It changed the whole skyline of New York City.
Sure did.
I just remember turning on my TV.
So back then, I was a young man back then, and
So I made my way through the security screening and came down the escalator, as you saw there from the footage.
I was a drunk, right? And I called out of work that day. It was a Tuesday. I remember I got drunk the night before. Tuesday, I woke up. I called out of work. I was a maintenance man, and I was watching the news, and they were saying a plane hit the building, but it was clear skies that day. I remember it was crystal clear skies, beautiful day, and I'm like, there's no way it was an accident. And then all of a sudden, it was around 9:15, 9:20, I think it was. As I'm watching the news, I see the other plane come, bam, like holy shit. So right then, I leave my apartment. And I walked to my mother's house, right? I'm walking by the armory in Bristol, Connecticut. And there is service members outside with M16s telling me to get on the other side of the street. Like they weren't messing around, man. All the armories, everything was on lockdown. It was crazy. It was kind of, we were under attack that day. Yeah. Now this is the inside the memorial. I think this is the basement where the pylons for the building are. I'm pretty sure that that's what this is. That's kind of like the steel that was sticking out of the ground when you guys walked up, right?
No, it was a lot bigger than that. It was like it had the World Trade Center had like that facade.
Here's the bomb blast, 1993.
Yeah, I was working that day. I think it was on a Friday.
Yeah, it says February 26, 1993, the bomb blast, B2 level of World Trade Center parking garage. 1,200-pound bomb. How many people died on that attack? Do you know?
I don't. But I know some people lost their lives.
There's nothing that can prepare you
not to
for
the
what you
degree of
see.
9/11, but yeah, some people lost their lives on that day, unfortunately.
All right, here's a staircase.
Inside here, and these steps just here are known as the survivor stairs, where hundreds of people managed to escape.
Wow, look at them steps. Wow. Look at that melted metal and everything.
Unbelievable.
Wow. The column. Remnants.
My nephew will actually
What are those there for?
I have no idea.
Oh, it's dedicated to the first responders.
Oh, okay.
Firehouse garage door with a mural on it. Damn. Hopefully it doesn't take another situation like that to bring our country together, because it's a crazy divide right now. People need to respect one another, try to help each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of all this political bullshit that's going on. It's crazy. So you guys got to walk around pieces like that when you're rescuing people, right? You're stepping over pieces like this. You're climbing over them.
No, I mean, that was in the pile. We didn't go on the pile originally. And the first day, you got to remember, there were underground fires. There were voids underneath. There were things burning underground.
So you couldn't go in there.
We were standing next to it, but we didn't climb on top of it. I didn't see anybody the first day like going on top of the pile. People might have, but I didn't see it. It was so unstable. You just didn't know if you leaned on something, you could fall into a hole. I mean, you got to remember there was that parking garage and you had trains that went beneath there. So, I mean, there was a big void beneath that pile. So you didn't want to fall into it.
Yeah. Were there like collapses going on? Like,
yeah, I'm sure there were. I remember you had structural engineers from some of the larger construction companies that built those buildings. I remember seeing Bovis and I think Skansky. I mean, big time companies that put up skyscrapers. They had their structural engineers down there because they were afraid. They thought that there was the possibility that part of Manhattan could fall into the Hudson River, because you got to remember that whole area was built on landfill.
Yeah, and there's a casing.
So
there's
they
like
were
a
afraid.
wall casing, right? There's like
yes,
yeah,
right.
it holds
so they
the
thought
river
that
back.
implosion cracked that casing.
Yeah, and they were scared that it was going to start pouring in. It would have flooded the whole place
and killed more people.
That would have been insane. Thank God it didn't happen like that.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I remember that now.
Yeah, the casing. I remember that too. They were trying to stop it from flooding the island. I don't know what these blue things are.
Some kind of maybe subway tile.
Oh, the antenna. Do they have it? They do. There it is. That's the antenna that was on top of the World Trade Center. Wow.
What's left of it, yeah.
Elevator motor.
Wow.
That thing's a little worn out, you think?
It looks like a giant starter for a car.
Yeah. That's the fire truck. Shout out to
That's
Chad
the way they
Marks.
look
He
down
took
at
a
the dump.
picture
So
right in front of that.
Well, you picture that, right? Now picture at the dump being hundreds of
Yeah,
them
let me pause it.
like that.
Yeah.
And
all
that's cleaned
mangled
up. That's cleaned up.
Yeah, definitely. They were
They got
covered in that
all the
dust and
dust
shit,
and
right?
toxic shit off the, yeah, but at the dump, it wasn't like that. It was, you know, they were just kind of still covered. I mean, the rain washed a lot of it off, but still they were nasty.
It's another steel support. It's pretty wild, huh?
Now I've just made my way up the escalator and back outside.
It is. Go check out this channel.
I definitely will.
The Sandbrook Adventures, it's called. It's the one with the 9/11. Damn, man, it's pretty sad situation, and hopefully our country can pull it together and you know, overcome situations like this.
Yeah, hopefully nothing like that ever happens again, you know?
Yeah. It's been pretty quiet recently, despite all the weather anomalies going on and the UFOs and everything else.
I know.
Who the hell knows what the future holds for us?
It's true.
Just along for the ride, man. I'm just an observer, you know? But yeah, next time I want to do a show about organized crime. I want to have you on. I want to talk about some of your inside knowledge about organized crime and John Gotti and all this other shit, you know?
Well, by the time I went into organized crime, John Gotti was out in Marion, Illinois doing, I don't know, life. But, you know, I've got stories about other guys.
Yeah. And we'll get to him next time you come on. I appreciate it. You want to give a plug to your book? I got a link in the description for his book. Go check out his book. It's in the description.
Yeah.
And, you want to tell him about it real quick?
Yeah, sure. Just go to Amazon, type in my name, Vic, Ferrari like the car. My Amazon book library come out. I've written 6 books, 4 of which are behind the scenes look at the New York City Police Department. They're funny stories. They're $10 paperback, $2.99 ebook download. Like the NYPD's Flying Circus, Cops, Crime, and Chaos. Got a lot of funny stories about behind the scenes stuff in the NYPD. And if you get a chance, check out my podcast, NYPD Through the Looking Glass, where I bring on retired NYPD members to tell their stories that worked in different units.
That's cool, man. And the link for it is in the description of this video. If you guys like this type of content, hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell so you can get my videos every time they drop. And if you want to donate to the channel, you can hit up my Cash App. It's Bill Staxx 2021. And I appreciate every single person that takes the time to watch my show. And if you don't like my show, too fucking bad. Start your own podcast. Thanks, man. Have a great day.
No, thanks a lot.
Vic.
I appreciate it. That was funny.